Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today to learn a little bit about several different ways you can get PDFs from DITA. We're calling this Many Paths to the Cheese because I, at least, am from Wisconsin, so I have to put cheese in everything. I am a DITA specialist at IXIASOFT. I've been there for 7 years. Some of you might know me as the author of DITA for Print, which is a guide for creating XSL-FO based PDFs, and I'll mention that again in the presentation. And I'm also a contributor to a couple of other really useful books about technical communication. And you might have seen me in different presentations. I seem to show up pretty often. So Thanks again for joining us. And now I will let my co-presenter introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Corinna. I'm one of the co-founders of Datazone Limited, who are the creators of Miramo. I have a particular interest in the Muramo PDF DITA-OT Toolkit plugin. I have over 30 years, or rather more than that, in software development. And I have a computer science degree from Cambridge University, and I'll be doing the Muramo PDF demo later on in this presentation.
Okay, great. So now you know who we are, so let's get started. So again, there are many paths to the cheese. There are a lot of good ways to get PDFs from DITA. We're only going to cover 3 today, and what these have in common is that they are very DITA Open Toolkit based. And it's probably fair to say that they are the, well, 3 most well, that's not even fair to say either. I'll just say there are 3 very common and very robust ways to generate PDFs from DITA, but there are a lot more. Many of you may be using Adobe FrameMaker or InDesign, which have their own PDF engines. There's a very nice product out there called DITA in Print, which uses the LibreOffice package to generate PDFs from DITA. Many CCMSs have their own specific solutions, and the list goes on and on. So if you're using one of these or something else, and you join us for the candid conversation, we would love to hear about your experience, the good and the bad. We're always looking for more information about this. So I'm going to start with XSL-FO. Now, what is XSL-FO? Well, it stands for Extensible Style Sheet Language Formatting Objects. That's a bit of a mouthful. And it's a form of XML. So it's not a tool and it's not a product. And if you want an analogy, XSL-FO is to paginated output PDF, as HTML is to online or browser-based output. So it's an intermediate language between DITA and your PDF, essentially. So it takes something like this simple paragraph you see here of DITA, and it converts it to XSL-FO. So the paragraph, for example, becomes an FO block element. The bold becomes a FO inline element with a font weight of bold, and so forth. So it is a completely different language for marking up the content. Now, how does an XSL-FO transform work? Well, the DITA Open Toolkit includes a plugin that uses XSL-FO, and that plugin is called Org DITA PDF2, and I'll probably just call it PDF2 from here on. So you run a build, and you specify your input map and that you want to use the PDF2 plugin or your own customization of it. And this plugin, very simply put, merges your input DITA map into one large XML document. Then it transforms that large DITA XML document into XSL-FO, and then it hands it off to a PDF renderer. Now, this XSL-FO file, it includes all of your content, but it also includes all of the formatting information. So fonts, font sizes, weights, colors, line heights, and so forth, all of the table specifications. It also includes the page information. So every page specification for every page, the size, the margins, the body regions, the header and footer regions, etc. So as you might imagine, this is a huge file. It's very, very verbose, even for a very small set of content. And then the PDF renderer takes this file and turns it into a PDF. And that's a very, very high level view of the process. There are quite a few other steps in there. But what are the advantages of XSLFO? Well, it is an established, widely used and proven technology. And I would say most people producing PDFs from DITA, if they're using the DITA Open Toolkit, are using XSLFO. The DITA Open Toolkit fully supports it open source, so that PDF2 plugin that I mentioned is quite well developed. It has an awful lot of options in there. It is a very strong basis for creating your own customizations. And XSLFO is very customizable and it's very flexible. So it is code-based. I mean, it's literally just code. There's no GUI. You are writing code in XSL files. And the advantage of that is that you're not limited by a user interface that only offers certain options. You know, if there's not a field for it or a radio button for it, you can't do it. Well, that's not the case with XSLFO. If you can figure out XSLFO and XSL, you can do almost anything. And there is, and I'm gonna toot my own horn for a minute here, there is a good reference book available for this, DITA for Print, that is a workbook that teaches you from the ground up how to create your own customizations of the PDF2 plugin. It assumes you know nothing. It assumes you're a technical writer like me who's learning this from scratch. So it does really do a lot of hand-holding. And the PDF renderers that are available for XSLFO are very robust and they're well supported. And in fact, there's one that's included free with the DITA Open Toolkit, which is FOP, that's by Apache. And so you know, once you install the DITA Open Toolkit, you are literally set up to start producing PDFs right out of the box. They're not the prettiest PDFs, but you can get them immediately. And then there are two commercial options, Antenna House and RenderX. And both of these are very good. And again, they're very well supported. They have very responsive help. And they are probably more suitable for enterprise level work. And if you have very complex specifications for your PDFs, or if you're producing PDFs in double byte languages, you probably want one of the commercial options. Now, what are the disadvantages of XSLFO? Well, it is complex. It's a whole language that you basically have to learn. So you essentially need to learn XSLFO and you need to learn XSL to do the actual transforms. And neither one of those are exactly a walk in the park. And it is a niche technology. So even though I said on the previous slide that it's very widely used, it is, but it's a widely used niche. So unless your company has been producing PDFs from XML using some sort of automated publishing, you're not likely to have an XSL-FO expert in-house. It's just not something that most people learn in the course of, typical technology training. So you'll either have to learn to do this, or you'll have to hire a consultant to create and maintain your PDF plugins. And the PDF renderers are not cheap. FOP is free, as I mentioned, and it does a pretty good job, and it may be all you need, so it may be just fine. But it isn't as robust as the commercial options. And so again, if you're doing double byte languages or you have some other very complex specifications, it may not be enough for you. And XSLFO is only for print output. So you can't repurpose any code for online outputs. And so if you are producing PDFs and maybe web help or some other online help flavor, or any kind of HTML-based deliverables, then if you want to style them the same, you'll have to do the work twice. That can be, that can be time consuming. So we're going to move on to CSS now. And what is that? Well, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And again, this is a styling language. It's not a tool and it's not a product. And it describes how HTML elements are displayed on screen or on paper. So here's our same paragraph of DITA. And here is how it would be rendered in HTML with some inline CSS. So the P tag remains a P tag. DITA and HTML share that tag in common. And the bold tag becomes a div. And it's that style attribute there, that is the CSS, font weight bold. So again, very simple example. But as you can see, CSS is it describes the appearance of the information. Now, how does a CSS transform work? Well, it's sort of similar to the XSL-FO transform. The difference is that the DITA Open Toolkit that you can download open source does not include a CSS-based PDF plugin. There is a free Rocks XML PDF CSS page plugin that you can download at GitHub, and I've included the link to that later in the presentation. So you can download that and install it. Now, Oxygen XML editor, which many of you are probably familiar with and use, includes the Oxygen PDF CSS plugin and offers PDF with CSS as a transformation scenario built in. But you do have to have Oxygen to take advantage of these. They are both licensed. So whichever methodology you choose, you run a build, you specify your input map and that you want to use one of these plugins, or again, your customization of it. And again, at a very high level, the plugin merges your input DITA map into one large XML document. Then it converts that document to HTML5 and hands it off to a PDF renderer. And the PDF renderer applies the CSS styling to the HTML5 document to create the finished PDF. So instead of XSLFO being the intermediate language, HTML5 is the intermediate language, if you will. So what are some of the advantages of CSS? Well, it is also an established, widely used and proven technology. Every website designer in the world knows CSS. And while you probably don't have an XSLFO expert in-house, you probably do have someone in-house, someone in your marketing team or someone in your IT group who does know CSS. So you probably have in-house resources to help you with that. It's also extremely customizable and flexible. Again, it's code-based, so you're not limited by a user interface. And if you can figure out CSS and XSL, then again, you can do almost anything with it. And this is probably the greatest strength of CSS in my mind, is that you can repurpose much of the same CSS for PDF and online media to promote the same look and feel for all of your outputs. And in fact, the Oxygen publishing engine makes this very simple. You can create one plugin from which you can generate both web help and PDFs. And again, the PDF renderers are robust. They're well supported. So you'll notice that Antenna House is in this list as well. So it does both XSLFO and CSS. There is a Prince XML, which is free for non-commercial use, and I've got a link to download that as well. There's Oxygen Chemistry, which is its PDF, CSS-based PDF engine. And there's a couple of others that seem to be more suited for integration into a tool chain rather than for, on-demand type builds, but there are some other options. Now, the disadvantages of CSS. Well, the addition of these pagination components of CSS is fairly new. It only joined the fray with CSS 3. So a lot of designers who work with browser-based media might not be familiar with these components because they just haven't had a need to use them. So even though you may have a CSS expert in-house, they may not know about the pagination aspects of CSS. And it's less precise. So HTML, of course, is just less precise than DITA in general because DITA elements are semantic. They describe your information. HTML elements do not, and there are kind of fewer HTML elements than there are DITA elements, and there's not necessarily a one-to-one match for things. So you may end up mapping a number of different DITA elements to the same HTML element. But to be fair, the same is true for XSLFO. So you might lose some semantic distinction in your conversion. And many people claim that they can't quite get the level of precision in their page layouts with CSS than they do with XSLFO. And from my rather limited experience with this, it does seem to be akin to generating an HTML file and then generating a PDF from you've got your HTML file open in a browser and then you print it to a PDF. So it's not necessarily quite as page oriented as XSLFO is. And again, maybe this is just me, but I feel that the CSS-based plugins are a bit less robust. And this probably comes from just the amount of experience I've had with the PDF2 plugin. That plugin is quite advanced. Even though the output that it produces out of the box is rather plain, that's just because it hasn't been very highly styled. But there's a lot of processing that's already there. And so you don't often have to add a lot. You just have to tinker with it a bit and restyle. And just the base plugin gets you probably 70% of the way you need to be towards a custom PDF plugin. And I don't find that with the CSS-based plugins. They seem very, very much more bare bones, and they require a lot more work out of the gate to get something really customized and nice. But again, that may be just me. I've had much more experience with XSLFO than I have with CSS. Now we come to our third methodology today, and that is Miramo PDF. And it differs from the other two in that it is a product. So it has support and training available. So unlike XSLFO or CSS, if you need help with those, there is no, you can't call the XSLFO company and get help with it. You have to rely on other resources. The DITA Open Toolkit users list is fantastic, and I rely on it a lot, and you can generally get good answers. But it's not quite the same as having an expert that you can call or send an email to and say, hey, I'm trying to do XYZ, can you help me out? So that is a big advantage of Miramo PDF. And it's sort of a product suite, I guess you might say. It includes Miramo Designer, and that lets you create templates using an intuitive graphical user interface. And that right there sets it apart from the others. And I think that makes it very attractive to people who have been using something like FrameMaker or InDesign or even Microsoft Word or some other desktop publishing product, because it immediately puts you in unfamiliar ground. You're designing a page with a picture of the page in front of you, and you can manipulate that page and the objects on the page in a way that makes visual sense. You're not writing code and trying to imagine what that page is going to look like when it's created from your code. And then there is Miramo Composer, which is the PDF formatting engine. So it is analogous, if you will, to Antenna House or FOP or Prince or Chemistry, for example. And then there's Miramo Enterprise, and that is an enterprise level job queuing and generation software. So if you're using Miramo to do large scale automated publishing, or if you're using it with a CCMS or something, you're going to need Miramo Enterprise. And then there is com.miramo.mm PDF, which is the DITA Open Toolkit plugin. So yes, Miramo PDF does use the DITA Open Toolkit, and it takes advantage of the very good pre-processing that the DITA Open Toolkit does to your DITA. So for example, when you are generating a PDF from a map, many things have to happen. Your key definitions have to be resolved, your conrests have to be resolved, your cross-references have to be resolved, the indexing has to be done, so forth and so on. And so all of this pre-processing is done very well by the DITA Open Toolkit, and so Miramo just takes advantage of that, doesn't reinvent that particular wheel. Now, how does it work? Well, you design your templates in Miramo Designer, and again, it's fully GUI. I can't stress that enough. But XSL is available behind the scenes if you need it to do more complex things. So for example, in the GUI, you may be able to determine that you want your titles to look a certain way, but you may want to preface those titles with some text based on some piece of metadata or something like that. Well, that's something you're going to need XSL to do, and it's available. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the GUI, but you also get the strength and the flexibility of the XSL. So you create your own extension of the Miramo PDF plugin, or you can use the out-of-the-box plugin with your own templates. So that's another nice mix and match advantage. So for example, if I need to change the look and feel of an XSLFO based template, I have to create my own extension of that PDF2 plugin. I have to, there's no other choice. But with Miramo, if I'm happy with the way the processing is being done, and all I want to do is change the appearance of the PDF, then I can do all of that with just a template. So I can continue to use the base Miramo plugin and just create my own templates in the GUI. Very nice option there. And so this plugin, again, sort of in a nutshell, it merges the input DITA map into one large XML document, and then it transforms the DITA XML into Miramo XML. And then it hands that off to either Miramo Composer or Miramo Enterprise, depending on which one you're using. And then Miramo Composer or Enterprise merges the Miramo XML document with the template to produce the final PDF. So what are the advantages? Well, I think I've already listed some of them, but it's also established, widely used and proven. So although Miramo PDF is fairly new in the DITA world, Datazone, the parent company, is long established in the enterprise level XML PDF world. They're very experienced with large scale PDF output, and they've developed their own extremely robust and flexible technologies for that. So again, you've got the GUI, and I can't say enough about that. And it provides easy access to nearly all of these formatting options. And you can design, you can modify your document designs in minutes, and Corinna's going to show us that a bit later. And if, again, you need some special effects, you can achieve that using XSLT. And you can reuse templates to create the same look and feel for multiple document types. So you've got your plugin, which is doing the processing. You've got your templates, which are doing the formatting. So you can use multiple templates with one plugin, or you can do it the other way around. So you can have a one-to-many relationship in both directions if you want to use different processing but the same look and feel, or different look and feel with the same processing. You can do it either way. So, and designers don't have to code, and coders don't have to design. So generally with XSLFO or even CSS, you've got one poor person who is either a graphic designer who's trying to figure out XSLFO or CSS. They probably know CSS, so they're trying to figure out XSLFO. Or more likely, it's a poor technical writer who's trying to figure these things out. So they're having to both design this PDF and figure out the code to create it. Or you've got, some poor coder who maybe doesn't have that much of an aesthetic sense, who's trying to do a design and the code at the same time. So either way, there's a real potential mismatch there. But here you can, in theory, have a graphic designer who designs the template in Miramo Designer and hands it off to someone who knows XSL to pair that with a plugin and create the final package. And of course, it does have enterprise capabilities. So you can use it small scale on your desktop, or you can use it large scale in your company to produce thousands of pages of PDFs a day and anything in between. And it's affordable, and it can save you tons of money and time. Definitely it can save you time. It does save you money, but I always think about the time, because as someone who's invested hundreds, maybe thousands of hours in XSLFO development, I can say I'd like to have some of those hours back, and Muramo PDF would have given me that time back. Now the disadvantages. Well, the XSLT customizations do require some proprietary Miramo XML understanding. So that is a language you have to learn. But in fairness, you would also have to learn CSS. You would also have to learn XSLFO. So there's really no way to do this without having to learn something. And Miramo XML, in my experience, I found it to be a very straightforward language. Certainly no more complex than XSLFO, and easier in many respects. It is strictly for PDF output only. So again, you can't repurpose any of your work for your online-based outputs. And there are a few special DITA and PDF constructs that aren't yet supported, such as image map or image compression, but this product is undergoing active development. Every release of it offers, many, many new features. And so if there's something that you need that's not there, it's pretty much guaranteed that it's going to be there in the fairly near future. And it can be more expensive than some alternatives in a server environment. But again, it depends so much on the environment, on your needs, on your particular configuration, and so forth. So that's a difficult blanket statement to necessarily make. Now, here's a few useful links if you want to learn more about XSLFO. I mentioned there's the DITA for Print book. There's XSL formatting objects, which I found to be an extremely valuable resource for learning XSLFO. And then if you want to download the DITA Open Toolkit, you can do so at that link there. And here are some useful links for CSS. There is only one printed resource that I know about, and that is a small book that's been published by Antenna House called Introduction to CSS for Paged Media. Oxygen has several tutorials on their website and their YouTube channel, so I would definitely go check that out. The XML Rocks download is where you can download that open source CSS plugin that I mentioned earlier that you can add to the DITA-Open toolkit. And there's a tutorial for CSS paged media available as well. And then if you want to download prints, which you will need, if you're going to use the XML Rocks plugin, you can download that there. And then for Miramo, of course, that is their website where you can go and download Miramo Designer and Miramo Composer if you want to try them out. And then Miramo also has a YouTube channel with many very useful demos that show various aspects of creating templates and formatting different aspects of those templates. So now that I've blathered on for a while, I'll do some very brief demos for you. And when I say very brief, I do mean very brief. I'm not actually going to create any plugins or write any XSL-FO or XSL because that's boring and nobody wants to watch me type. But I will just give you a quick flyover view of XSL-FO and CSS, and then I will turn it over to Corinna, and she will show you Miramo. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is XSL-FO, and this is definitely the plugin that I have the most experience with. I've been working with XSL-FO plugins for probably 10 years now, and I'm definitely more comfortable in this world. So the plugin that I've mentioned, the default one, is the, and I've got a couple of different open toolkits here, pardon me, is the OrgDITA PDF 2 plugin. And it is entirely, it's entirely self-contained. And to someone new to it, it's going to be intimidating because there are a ton of files to work with. So these are the attribute files, and this does the formatting. So this controls the look and feel of the various DITA elements. And then there are I call these the XSL files, but they're all XSL files. But these do the processing. So this controls how the different elements are processed. And they are fairly intuitively named, but there's a lot of them. And so it, like I said, it can be intimidating, and you just kind of have to roll up your sleeves and dive in there and learn. But when you need to create your own PDF with your own look and feel, you create an extension of this plugin. And I've done that. I've created a com.convex PDF plugin. And all this plugin does is it customizes the cover page. And so the way that an extension works is your plugin extension only has your exceptions or your overrides to the default processing. And so it's going to, the process is first going to, and this again is very simplified, it's going to sort of grab all of the default processing, then it's going to look in your own plugin and it's going to override those defaults with whatever overrides you have. So in this case, I have overridden the look and feel for the front matter, which is the cover page, and I have overridden the processing for the front matter. And I've got a couple of other files in here that create a couple of variables that grab my map metadata and turn it into a variable that I can display on the cover page. And then I've got a file here that basically sets the page dimensions to A4 and sets the margins and so forth. So to then create the PDF, you set up some build files. Won't go into that, but or you could do it through your CSS. There's a lot of, or an Oxygen transformation scenario. There's a lot of possibilities there. I've just set these up as a standalone build, and I need to change this back. I was being sneaky about it today. So I can just run this this batch file here, and it's gonna kick off the whole process. It's gonna grab the properties that I've specified from my properties file. It's gonna go to my ConVEx plugin because that's the one that I specified. And this is what you're gonna see on the screen if you're doing it this way. And I've spent hundreds of hours of my life staring at this screen, essentially. And it's taking a bit longer than I thought it would. There we go. And voila, there is my PDF. Current date and time, no sleight of hand involved. And the outcome of this is that I have a nice, quote unquote, cover page that includes 2 images that I specified. It's got the main book title from my map and the book title alt from my map. It's got a little logo up here, and it's got the book number from my map metadata, and it's got an automatically generated current date there. Now, I could go on and look through this PDF, and the rest of it is just the default processing because I didn't touch any of that. So what you see just represents the out-of-the-box PDF for all of this. So that's how an XSLFO plugin works. And again, lots of files, kind of complex, big learning curve, but you can achieve an incredible level of precision with this because it is specifically designed for paged outputs. Now I have to confess that I'm gonna do a little bit more of a flyby for CSS because I don't, my technology is kind of on-demand learning. So if I have a customer who needs a thing, I learn to do it. And to be honest with you, I have not had a single customer ask me for a CSS-based plugin. I just don't think it has that much traction yet. But I have, done an overview of the plugins, and I'll show that one to you as well. That one's in a different open toolkit. So here's the plugin that I mentioned, the Rocks XML PDF CSS page. And you can see that it's at a glance quite a bit simpler. There are quite fewer files to deal with. And that's because this plugin relies very heavily on the XHTML transform in the DITA Open Toolkit. So if I look at this file here, I can see that the very first thing it does is it imports a file from the base XHTML plugin. And if I were to go to that file in this plugin, I would see that this file in turn imports a lot of other files. So it's not a self-contained plugin. It relies on the XHTML processing, and that's because, as I mentioned, the first thing it does after it takes your merged XML file is it converts it to HTML. That's the intermediate format. And so it's using the DITA to XHTML conversion to do that. This is the most recent version of the plugin that I saw. There may be a more recent version that actually takes advantage of the HTML5 plugin in the newer versions of the DITA Open Toolkit. I'm not sure. But essentially, this is reliant on the XHTML plugin. So what you could potentially have to do is customize this plugin as well, and then rely on that customization in your own customization of the XML Rocks plugin. I'm just guessing. There's probably another way to go about it because XML and XSL are very flexible and you can kind of mix and match how you import things. But just be aware that this isn't a totally self-contained plugin. And I've looked through this, and honestly, I can't get a lot of traction just at a glance. I don't see a specific place, for example, to modify a cover page. I looked through the code. I don't see anything that jumps out at me as this is creating a cover page. But again, I'm just not that familiar with it. And if I got a demand for it, I would certainly roll up my sleeves and dig in there and do it. But I can show you that transform as well. And so I have a similar situation here. I have some standalone build files, and I'm going to launch this build file and run my CSS build. And we get to stare at this screen again. And if you do this long enough, you realize that if it takes a little while, that's encouraging, because when that screen comes up and disappears very quickly, that's a dead giveaway that your build did not run. So longer is better. And here is my output for that, my CSS-based output. And again, this is going to be just the bare bones there. So it's just grabbing the main book title and the book title alt from this map, and it's producing this. And as with the XSLFO based output, it's not bad. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not great. There's a long way to go with it, but anyway, so you've seen those two, and now I'm going to turn it over to Corinna and let her show you the magic of Miramo PDF.
So I'm going to take you through redesigning a cover page using Muramo PDF and the DITA-OT Toolkit plugin. So what we're looking at here is Oxygen, and we have our sample DITA open on screen. And over here we have the standard transformation scenarios which come with Oxygen. And for convenience, I'm going to use Oxygen because it's easy to set and build parameters and so on. So the first thing you do when you're trying to develop a new design is to run it through the standard development version of Muramo PDF. So to do that, I just double click, and here we have it. So the first thing you'll notice, this is the out-of-the-box PDF, which is produced with the default template, which comes with Muramo PDF. You'll see we have these PDF tooltips. And the idea is that you can look at this PDF, and here we see we've got an article title and a book title, alt title. And here we've got a cover, which is in a cover section. And these tooltips tell you exactly what you need to do to go back to the Miramo PDF template and start making changes. So again, here we have a top 1 paragraph, top 2 paragraph. And I'll just spin you through the default output. Okay, so here is our target design, which is taken from the PDF that Leigh produced earlier. And we'll notice a few things. We've got a few dimensions here, the locations of the two images. And here, if we take a closer look at what's in the PDF, we'll see we've got an Arial 36-point paragraph for the title. And here we've got a 24-point paragraph. And we can inspect the RGB values of this color, which is 255-140-0. And we'll also notice that we've got a data element, which comes from the DITA map, and we've got a print date. So having inspected, having all that information, we'll go back and I'll now create a new blank Miramo designer template. So here I'm going to choose a new blank DITA template. And the first thing we'll do is I'm going to save it alongside the default template in the DITA-OT Toolkit plugin. So here it's very easy to create your own customization of the standard plugin, but for simplicity, I'm simply going to change it and save it to a template called copy and fudge. inside the default, the templates folder of the com.miramo.mm PDF. So here we have our designer. This is the design view. We have the properties view. And over here, we have the format definition. So we have a whole set of different format definitions. The first one I'm going to take a look at is the cover page def. So this gives you a visual representation of your cover page. It's very plain, as you can see at the moment. So the first thing we're going to do is just start getting rid of the bits we don't want. And then we can move these grouped elements down to the bottom, and let's make sure that they're centered on the page. And you'll see here we have placeholder variables. I'll come back to that a bit later. So the first thing is, let's import our graphic. So here it is. And we're going to say the top for this one is going to be 40 millimeters. So you've got your first graphic. Now let's go and find the second graphic. And again, the top for this one is going to be 120 millimeters. And we'll just, actually I'll move it down a bit, move it across to the right. So you'll see you can either use drag and drop to redesign your cover page, or you can specify the exact values as you need. While we're here, we're also going to go and grab the logo, and we'll stick that up at the top left, top right, sorry. And again, the top will be 20 millimeters down. I've got a snap interval set, so it's snapped to that 20 millimeters. So now let's take a look at these paragraphs. Just move that up slightly. So here, I've just double clicked to locate in the paragraph, and we'll see it's the article title paragraph. So the first thing we're going to do is make that 36 points, and we'll make this paragraph 24 points. And now let's take a look at all our title paragraphs. So here we're going to do a modify, because we want to change two paragraphs at once. So it's the article title and the book title out title. So I'm right selected. I'm going to modify these, and we're going to change the font family to Arial. We'll make it bold. We're going to change the text alignment to be centered. And here we're going to take a look at the text color. So I'm going to choose document color 2, which is currently blue. But if I click on this little icon here, you'll see we can redefine document color 2, which is what I'm going to do now. So it's 255, 140, and 0. So when I click apply, that records the new definition for that document color. And we can, if we want, create shades and tints, but we'll stop there for the time being. So now, if I click on apply, we've centered and changed the color of these two paragraphs. So the final thing, if we go quickly back to the DITA, we'll see we've got a data element called book number. So you'll see these are placeholder variables, and placeholder variables exist for all the standard metadata elements. What we're going to do here is create a little text area down at the bottom. And now I'm going to create a new placeholder variable. So I've just clicked into the text frame, click Manage Variables. I'm going to add a new variable called book number. So that's immediately given us access to that DITA data element. I can now insert that, sorry, wrong one. I can now insert that book number variable. And I'm also going to insert a date. So let's take a look at that. We have a whole set of date formats here. So we've got standard ones, month, day, year, day, month, year, and then we've got a print date. You'll see you can build up your date by using a set of building blocks. And I'm just going to take out the time So it fits in with the example that Leigh did earlier. So we've created that date variable. Now we're going to insert the print date. And sorry, you probably can't see this. Let's just zoom up a bit. Now at this point, we're going to insert a line feed character because we want it to go on to the next line. So there we are. The other thing is this is currently left aligned and it's formatted as a header paragraph. So I'm going to create a new paragraph and we're going to call that cover details. And again, I'll set the font and that should be 10 points. And here we'll change the alignment. So we've got that new paragraph format. We now select it here. So we're going to say cover details and we instantly get right aligned text. So we're going to save this template. Now we go back to Oxygen. And here we're going to make a copy of the existing, one of the standard transformation scenarios. Okay, and we'll call it 2.0 copy and fudge. The only thing we have to do here to pull in a different default or different template is to give the name here. So I've just said use copy and fudge.mfd from the standard PDF folder. I'm now going to double click. And again, we'll bring up our reference PDF. And after a couple of shakes, and here we are. So this is the cover page. You'll see we've got the colors, the graphics, the dates. And if we scroll through, there you have your redesigned document. So I'm aware we're getting short of time, so I'll hand back to Leigh to finish off the presentation. Thank you very much for your sharing.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and especially thank you, Corinna, for showcasing that wonderful product. I really enjoy working with it and can't recommend it highly enough. And so if you're looking for a PDF solution, please consider it, in your evaluations. Picture is definitely worth 1,000 words there, and just watching how easy it is to create that cover page it's just amazing. It's groundbreaking. So anyway, I hope you can all join us for the candid conversation. We would love to hear your experiences with PDF creation, with these technologies or any other. And we look forward to talking with you then. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a million.